If you're trying to drop from 3 naps to 2 and suddenly nights explode, you're not imagining it. This transition has a special talent for making your baby act like bedtime is a personal insult. And if you've been staring at a nap chart like it's the stock market, trying to time everything perfectly, I get it. You're not failing. You're just trapped in the most confusing nap transition on earth. Hi, I'm Treasure, and I help exhausted, busy parents get out of survival mode with sleep that actually makes sense for your baby and your real life. Let's make this shift without wrecking nights and without you having to guess every day. Let's start with the biggest relief first. A messy week during this transition does not mean your baby is not ready or that you ruin their sleep forever. Here's the sneaky truth. Most 3 to 2 nap disasters are not because your baby can't handle 2 naps. It's because the timing gets wobbly and bedtime pays the price. By the way, if you want this mapped out in a way you can follow when you're running on fumes, download my free guide, The Modern Parent Sleep Roadmap. The link is in the video description and on the screen. Now let's get you unstuck. Here's what's actually going on under the surface. Your baby is starting to need more awake time to feel sleepy enough for naps, but not so much awake time that they spiral into overtired chaos. And that balance is fragile during this stage. One day they seem ready for 2 naps, the next day they're melting down at 4 p.m. like they've just worked a double shift. There are a few common patterns that create this exact problem. One is that the 3rd nap starts getting later and later, and suddenly bedtime gets pushed too late and nights get lighter, more restless, and more wakey. Another is that parents panic drop the 3rd nap, but the awake stretches get too long too fast. So you end up with a baby who is technically on 2 naps, but emotionally living in a constant state of, I'm fine, while clearly not fine. And then there's the bedtime trap. Parents think if naps were messy, I should push bedtime later so baby is tired, but that often flips into the opposite, where baby gets wired and fights sleep, has false starts, or starts waking earlier. Let me say this gently. Your baby doesn't need a later bedtime to fix this transition. They usually need a protected bedtime anchor and smarter nap math. Now let's talk about what helps starting tonight. The goal is not a perfect 2 nap schedule overnight. The goal is stable nights while you guide days into place. So here's the fewest moves plan that works for most families. Keep bedtime as your anchor and let naps flex around it for a little while. On the earliest days of this transition, bedtime often needs to move earlier, not later. Yes, earlier bedtime can feel unfair when you barely saw your baby after work, but it's one of the cleanest ways to protect nights and stop the overtired spiral. Here's a helpful way to think about the 3rd nap. You're not dropping it like a switch, you're letting it fade, and you only use it when it protects bedtime. So on days when your baby wakes from nap 2 and there's just no way they can make it to bedtime without falling apart, you use a tiny rescue nap. Not a big luxurious nap, a short strategic power nap that takes the edge off so bedtime doesn't turn into a war. And on days when nap 2 ends early enough and your baby can comfortably make it to bedtime, you skip the rescue nap and go for bedtime a bit earlier. That's how 2 naps stabilizes without you forcing it. Now, I want to myth bust something that causes so much suffering. Dropping to 2 naps does not automatically fix night waking. Sometimes night waking improves, but only when the schedule is balanced. If the timing is off, dropping a nap can actually make nights worse, and then parents think, see, it was the naps, when it was really the pacing. Let's zoom in on the 2 biggest timing mistakes that wreck nights. One is keeping the morning too flexible and hoping naps will sort themselves out. Your day has to start somewhere even if the night was rough. So pick a realistic morning anchor that you can stick with most days and let the first nap land based on that, not based on vibes. The second mistake is letting the last awake stretch get too long because you're trying to earn bedtime. That last stretch is where false starts and bedtime battles are born. If bedtime has been taking forever, if your baby wakes 30 to 60 minutes after bedtime, or if early morning waking suddenly shows up, I want you to suspect the last part of the day first. Not your baby being stubborn, not you doing something wrong, just timing and sleep pressure doing what they do. Now let me show you the smallest changes that make the biggest difference. If you're stuck in the in-between stage, focus on 3 outcomes: a solid first nap, a solid second nap, and a bedtime that doesn't drift late. That might mean stretching awake time a little in the morning so nap 1 isn't a quick crash nap. And it might mean protecting nap 2 so it doesn't get cut short by a too late nap 1. And if you're dealing with daycare, I want you to release the idea of perfect naps. Daycare sleep is often lighter, more stimulating, and more unpredictable, and your job becomes protecting nights and preventing the overtired crash. So, on daycare days, your best move is usually an earlier bedtime, even if naps were weird. Because trying to make up for daycare with a late bedtime is how you end up with an exhausted baby waking even more overnight. Now, here's the part parents don't want to hear, but it's said with love. If you keep offering that third nap just because you're scared of the evening, you can accidentally trap your baby in 3-nap land and keep bedtime too late. So we want to be intentional. Use the third nap only when it protects bedtime and keep it small enough that it doesn't steal from night sleep. In a second, I'm going to tell you the fastest way to know whether you're pushing too hard or not pushing enough in this transition, because this is the piece that saves nights. And here's where I'd stop guessing and get extra support if this has turned into a weekly cycle of chaos. I have a master's in social work, I'm a certified pediatric sleep consultant, and I'm the founder and CEO of Rested and Renewed Pediatric Sleep Consulting, and am also a toddler mom, so I know what it feels like when your whole evening disappears into sleep drama. If you want a plan tailored to your baby's temperament and your work reality, you can book a consult with me through Rested and Renewed. And if you're not ready for that yet, start with my free Modern Parent Sleep Roadmap because it helps you stop playing schedule roulette. Okay, here's that fast way to tell what's happening. If nights are getting worse and bedtime is getting harder, you're usually looking at overtired pressure, building from awake times being a little too long or bedtime drifting too late. If naps are getting short and your baby seems like they're fighting sleep but then they wake happy overnight or want to party at 3 a.m., you may be dealing with not enough sleep pressure at the right times. That's often when nap timing is too early, too late, or uneven day to day. So instead of trying to overhaul everything, you adjust one lever at a time. Most families get the quickest relief by protecting bedtime first, then smoothing the start of the day, then letting naps settle. Now, let's add a gentle note for sensory sensitive babies. Some babies get overstimulated easily and their bodies hold on to stress longer, so they may need a calmer wind down and a little more consistency around sleep cues during transitions. That doesn't mean something is wrong. It just means their nervous system needs a softer landing, especially when awake time is stretching. So if your baby seems extra wired, extra sensitive, or extra clingy during this transition, keep your routine predictable and your environment calming. And please don't interpret that as manipulation. That's just a baby who needs help regulating while their sleep needs are shifting. Now, let's talk about what not to do, because it's so tempting when you're desperate. Don't keep pushing bedtime later and later, hoping they'll crash. That can backfire into false starts, more night waking, and early morning waking that makes you feel like you're living the same day on repeat. And don't cap every nap aggressively just to force 2 naps, because overtired builds fast and nights pay for it. Instead, you're watching for a slow trend. Longer awake stretches becoming easier, naps becoming a little more predictable, and bedtime becoming smoother again. And if you're wondering how long this transition should take, here's the honest answer. It depends on your baby and your consistency, but most families feel noticeably better when they stop yanking bedtime around and stop treating the third nap like a permanent identity. Now let's cover red flags, because I never want you to feel like you have to guess when something is medical. If your baby has loud, persistent snoring, pauses in breathing, significant reflux distress, feeding issues with poor weight gain, unusual lethargy, or you're seeing signs of illness that affect breathing or hydration, call your pediatrician. And if you've been stuck in this transition for weeks, nights are getting worse, and you're doing everything right, but it still feels impossible, that's when personalized support is worth it. Because sometimes it's not about effort, it's about having the right adjustments for your baby's sleep needs and temperament. If this helped you feel even a little less panicked about tonight, the next video is going to give you the missing clarity that makes your whole plan feel simpler and more doable, especially when you're exhausted and you don't have time to trial and error. Tap the screen to watch my next video.
Before you go, download Treasure's free guide, hit subscribe, and watch the next one. You'll be so glad you did.